Yeah, people only root for those who don't need to be rooted for. And so I just asked them a couple questions. I was like, who here before pledging started was like, I want to be a part of this house? The guys were like, me. Okay. I'm like, okay, got it. Who here thought it was going to be easy? Who here thought it would be hard? They raised their hands. I'm like, guys, this is what hard feels like. And all of a sudden there's just like this big exhale in the room. They're like, expectations get reset. This is normal. You wanted this thing. You expected it to be hard. Reality now matches conditions. Sorry, expectations now match conditions. This is what hard feels like. And then all of a sudden it's like they got permission to feel shitty. And by getting permission to feel shitty, they stop feeling it. And the next one is like, what if we confront it and say like, what if they're right? Now what? Because I think a lot of effort gets put into trying to deny reality, right? Like there's this clip that I shared from Tom Bilyeu, and he was talking about how he gets made fun of for his ears being big, right? And I think it's a really good clip because his point that he was making, because it's such a visual, easy example for people to understand. He's like, is that it's true. I do have big ears. And so that's like if they're like, you have no right to be making content. Are they right? Okay. And
yeah,
I'm still going to do it anyways. Because the thing is like, one of the things that I had earlier on in my career was like, I didn't think I was a really good person. Like I was like, I'm not a good person.
Yeah,
like some people are like, yeah, I just had that, right? And I had a history, whatever. And one of the things that gave me a lot of respite or relief from that kind of thought process was like, that's okay. Because I can still do the things that create success and not deserve it and still get it. And that actually felt very powerful for me because it was like, I don't have to deserve the success. I can still just do the stuff that gets it. It's like, you don't have to deserve the girl, but you can still do the things that get her. And do you deserve her when you have her? I don't know. Who knows? I hate the word deserve to begin with, right?
Yes.
But like that concept, because also I could segue into like gratitude around like, if you think you deserve it, then you don't enjoy it. But that has been super powerful for me, which is like, what if they're right? And because a lot of people are just they spend so much effort trying to fight the fact that the comments might be right. This might have been a fucking terrible thumbnail.
Yep.
You know what? This might have been a boring video. This post might have been regurgitated content. This post might have been inspired too closely by someone else's post, right? What if they're right? And does it make me a piece of shit? What if it does? And I hear stats like that and I just think, man, it is so easy to win. Like that. I mean, like when I hear that, that's exactly what I think. I'm just like, man, for everyone who's like struggling to win, it's like most of the pain that people experience is purely in their own minds. And so to your point, I think there's an interesting one between like burnout versus hard. And so like for me, burnout is when I would define it as my output per unit of time decreases. So I can see that that's measurable, right? Now, like I can say like number of pages that I edit or the quality of the content that I create, like my output per time, like the team knows when I'm like 6 hours, 7 hours into recording something, they're like, I literally start like slumping. You're like physically, I just start like slumping and I like my cadence isn't as like, I'm just not as sharp, right? There's that versus emotional burnout, which I think people mislabel as burnout when really it's just like they don't know how to reframe reality. And so what it really is they got a comment on a post that bugged them. And like, again, it's like pulling it from the shadows. It's like, no, this stuff doesn't work. It's like, hold on. What's the one voice that actually is coming through? What is the real thing? Well, there is this comment. Okay, great. It's embarrassing to even have to say that. But when you say it, then you admit it and all of a sudden you put it in the light and the shame kind of starts to evaporate because then you can name it and be like, is this comment bigger than my future? Is this comment bigger than me? And one of the things that that has helped me was saying like, what's true about this? You stay in poverty until you learn the first lesson of poverty, which is 2 words, my fault. And so when I was younger, I was really angry at my parents, like many people are, right? Justified or not, doesn't really matter. I was very angry and I blamed them for the woes of my life. And I realized that when I was 19 that these people that I hated, I was giving all the power over the fact that I wasn't the person I wanted to be. And I was like, well, it's their fault. And the idea that I had actually given these people that I hated power over my success was ultimately something that made me feel sick to my stomach and was what allowed me to point the finger of blame inwards and say my fault. And then at least take ownership over the fact that sure, maybe your dad didn't hug you enough, or maybe your mom wasn't present or whatever it is, right? It's like, and like, I said this the other day, and it'll probably piss off a lot of your audience, so, you know, we can put our soft earphones on. Like, if you suffered from racial inequality, if you suffered from gender inequality, if you suffered from being born in Bangladesh, if you were sexually abused your entire life, you would be completely justified in the fact that you are not achieving the things that other people who didn't have those disadvantages have achieved. And I say this as a white guy who was born in America to a doctor father. I understand that. But at the same degree, you have the opportunity that Chris nor I have, which is that you can be an inspiration to people who went through the same thing and succeeded, despite those circumstances. Because I can promise that there is somebody who has had it worse and has done it better. And I think that one single point of proof, and like there's a global point of proof that you can look for sure, but like you can be that very local point of proof in your community or sub-community. And I think as soon as we shed that, that's like, I'm a big fan of power follows the blame finger. So like wherever you point the blame finger is where the power follows. And so it's like if you point it at the government has the power. If you point it at your spouse and say like it's their fault that I'm not in shape, it's their fault, they never let me do anything, it's like, well, you're giving them all the power. And so it's like until you're like it's my fault, it also becomes my responsibility. What if it's not your fault? It doesn't matter. And like I can't run marathons because I lost my leg at birth. And either you can just never try, or you put the metal thing on and you do it anyways.
Shoot, I can't remember who it was from. But basically that the best art is art where the artist makes it for themselves, and where you see commercial work is where a bunch of people are trying to make something for an audience. And so they're trying to like rinse and recycle stuff that actually solves no one's problems because no one is actually the audience. Whereas when you make it for yourself, there's thousands of people just like you who will have the same depth of understanding of it, but it feels selfish in the moment to make something for yourself. But when you make it for yourself, you actually make it for everyone. And so I think when you're on the start path, you can't look at the outcome as the only positive because you will never make it. And so the positive frame that I've always used is, sure, you can have the external ones of like, I like thinking about my first videos had like 13 views. And I'm like, well, if I had an audience of 13 people, I used to spend years pitching, weight loss stuff to rooms of 13, and that was fine. And so thinking about that way was helpful. But the most helpful frame was thinking about who I was becoming as the asset that I was building. So in real time, whenever I finished a long day's work, I was becoming more like the type of person who could work for 5 years without reward. And that would be part of the story I would someday tell. And so some of the biggest reinforcers I've had in my life has been futurecasting the story that I would tell about the shitty period that I was in. Like I remember when I was sleeping on the floor at my gym because I didn't have enough money for 2 rents. And I was like, I will fucking tell this story. And when I lost everything for the first time, I have the screenshot of the bank account. Like when I show it, people are like, oh, look, there's that thing. But they forget that there was a person who screenshotted it to be like, this won't fucking happen again. And I think having a larger narrative of where you're ultimately going, one, gives you the vision of where you're knows where he's going, but it allows the dragons that you have to slay along the way, the hard things that you have to overcome, to feed into the larger narrative of the story that you'll someday tell. And so like no one ever tells stories about the hero who made it all happen immediately and had no hardships. No one cares, right? Like, okay, you were born to a billionaire. Is there a story there? Not really, but everyone loves the story because we can see ourselves in the character and how much we hope to be like them. And it's the being like them, not the having what they have, that we usually like. And so reframing ourselves as the hero of that narrative in my harder times was what really got me through that, and thinking, I will tell this story someday. I want to give you the single easiest razor to predict my behavior. And I said, whatever will be the most epic story is the thing that I will most likely do. And so oftentimes the most epic story is not the shortest outcome to victory. It's the long saga that results in this big thing later eventually. And I was like, if you ever want to know, if you're like, I'm not sure what he's going to do in this situation, just wonder what the most epic story to tell would be. And that's usually what I will do. And I don't know if that's self-aggrandizing, but that's genuinely my razor for even making the big decisions about, okay, I'm going to sell Gym Launch. I'm going to marry Layla. I'm going to slum it and live at the gym. I'm going to fly around and do turnarounds. I'm going to start this whole idea of a media company that just gives exclusively. But like, how do I put all these together? It's like, well, what would be the most epic story? And I thought of this idea of just like, when I think about who that story I want to tell is this billionaire that documented the entire thing the whole way. and just gave. Because I always thought, I was like, I wish that Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and all these guys would have like, and Jeff Bezos, like would have just like, I would love to have seen 1997 Amazon content. And a lot of the content in terms of like, it's getting 5 views. It's like, it's okay because when we make it, they're going to come back and watch this. So I don't need them to watch it today. I want them to know that it's here when I do. And I think that got me out of the loop of it. I have to win right now. And then every one of them is just dropping a kernel or a breadcrumb for future me to refer back to. It won't get harder. Like, this is the hardest part. And so if you can just make it through this, everything else is downhill. It's not that the things that the dragons are going to slay aren't going to get bigger. They are. But you become so much more equipped to slay them back. And you have so many more allies. You have people in the stands cheering for you. You have the audience. You have all of these other things that are behind you. But at the beginning, it's just you with a stick against a bear. And arguably, that fight is a harder fight to win than beating a dragon when you have a nuclear bomb and 6 nations behind you. And so it's not even like the size of the hardship. It's just also the resources and how few of them you have, and how so much of the beginning is literally burning the one thing you have, which is time, because you have no leverage. You don't have the money to pay other people to help you. You don't have the resources to go like get someone no one can learn it for you. It's like there's a lot of the things that we care about a lot. Like, no one can work out for you. Doesn't matter how much money you have. No one can learn skills for you. And so in the early days, like, it feels so painful because you're like, you look around to see who can help you, and then you're like, fuck, it's me again. And I think getting comfortable with the idea that each of these things, kind of like Slumdog Millionaire, if you've seen that movie where I'll give you the TLDR. He goes through his entire life of randomness, and then he gets on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire version in India. And it has 12 questions to make $1 million. And from only 12 random experiences in his life that seemed meaningless at the time, was he able to answer all of the questions and then ultimately win. The skills that you develop along the way, like Steve Jobs learning calligraphy that then became Apple fonts that, transformed how we type. Those early days, that little trench winning in the weeds, oftentimes gives you these huge advantages later on because you have more context than anyone else. And so rather than lament them and hate the fact that you're going through it, remembering that these will be arrows that you put in the quiver that you're going to be using to slay the future bigger dragons. And so expecting it to be easy is what makes it much harder than it ever is. Because in the early days, hard was, ooh, stop. This isn't good. This is a warning sign. This is a red flag. I should slow down, or I should stop, I should pivot. But the more I think about it as a competitive landscape, as I'm clear on what this path is supposed to look like, and these rocks and these dragons are things that I'm going to have to slay along the way to get the princess or get the treasure, I get happier about the harder it is because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
And I think if you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're like, oh, poor me, to oh, poor everyone else who's going to have to fucking try.
Yeah.
And I think that is so much more motivating as a frame for the exact same circumstance. Like, the amount of times when I was on my lonely path where I was too different from the friends that I had, but not successful enough to be friends with the people that I wanted to be friends with. That's when you want people to root for you. That's when you want people to support you. Once you've already won, people are like, he's amazing, he's so good. But like, that's the time when you need it the least. And so you always have to be the person who roots for you before everyone else does. And it's usually a single clap in the auditorium for a very long period of time. It is a slow clap that's just you rooting for you. And that visual, I think, is one that you can kind of take, because it is, people struggle to do things alone. And the path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be.